Welcome to the Simplicity Sessions. I am Jen Pike, your host, registered holistic nutritionist, medical exercise specialist, the best-selling author of The Simplicity Project, and the creator of the women's revolutionary health program, The Hormone Project. As a mother, an entrepreneur, and women's health expert, I fully understand that our personal wellness journey is one to be enjoyed, not forced. Each week, I will be here for you, dropping a healthy dose of inspiration and introducing you to my fabulous guest experts, where we will dive deep into all things health and hormones, mindset, motherhood, relationships, entrepreneurship, and finances. I know that no matter where you come from, what your story is, that your goal is no different than mine. We are all, as mothers, women, friends, wives, craving more simplicity and more ease in all that we do. So let's make it happen together. Hello, happy Monday. It is episode 161. 161. That is crazy to me, but here we are. Tell you the truth, I could podcast every single day, interviewing different guests, chatting here with many of you. It's been such a wicked journey over these last couple of years. I have learned things I never would have known without this podcast. I have made friends with so many of my guests that I have interviewed. I made a brand new friend interviewing our guest today with Dr. Ben Reeves. I just love it. And I know that you all enjoy it too. I think the thing I love the most about podcasting is the accessibility. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can be listening when you're walking, working out, cooking, whenever, right? It fits in, and I absolutely love it. So before we jam into our session today with Dr. Ben Reeves, wanted to answer a couple of questions. A big one I get is, well, actually there's two that are related to this. What is an elixir, Jen, and what are tinctures? Because I talk about these two a lot. So a tincture, in its most basic definition, is a concentrated extract that's made from suspending a medicinal plant. So it's using things like its berries or its bark or its leaf, a component, taking that and suspending it in water and an alcohol or some other type of a solvent solution. And they do that for a lengthy period of time. And then that mixture is strained and it's bottled. And here we have a tincture. And they differ from other liquid herbal preparations like infusions or decoctions in that these actually extract a greater spectrum of therapeutic compounds from the whole plant and preserve them much longer, right? So there's lots of different ways that we can take herbal medicine in our body. We could do it in capsules, tablets, extracts, teas, and traditional tinctures, which is one of the ways for me that I find is the most therapeutic to be able to tap into the benefits that herbs can bring into our life. And so some of the reasons I love them so much is that the tinctures help to retain the most complete range of that plant's therapeutic constituents, which is why I will tend to, in a lot of my protocols, see if I can do a tincture versus a capsule. Very rarely will I ever recommend, I don't want to use the word prescribe, but recommend a tablet. If you remember, I'm working with people that are having a hard time digesting food they're chewing and they're not breaking it down. So how in the world are they going to be breaking down, a mittful of tablets? They're not. So I love the tinctures because they bypass the gut. They get directly into the body, into the stomach without having to go through all of the other channels. So it makes it much more therapeutic in dosing because we don't have to worry about any digestion. Tinctures literally require no digestion, which means they're bioavailable for people who have the most compromised digestive function. They're flexible in terms of how you administer the dosing. We can titrate up or titrate down, which means we can increase dosing and decrease very, very quickly. Small doses can be just as effective as large dosing of the same herb in another form. So I could give someone a couple of milliliters of a tincture for their body versus giving them, 4 to 5, maybe 6 different capsules in that same type of a form. I also love that they can be taken internally, but tinctures can also be applied topically. And I think the thing I love the most for people is that the shelf life on these are typically about 3 to 5 years, depending on the actual herb itself. So those are some of the reasons that I love them so much. And if you've been listening to me here for a while, the company that I talk the most about in terms of tinctures is St. Francis Herb Farm. I love their holistic herb approach. They use very traditional methods with plant medicine, and I'm, kind of obsessed. And so that was question number one. The other one that I had is I talk a lot on this show about different types of inflammation that can happen in the body. And a lady had written in asking me about her scalp. And then when she has a lot of stress and anxiety, she tends to scratch and pick her scalp, and she can oftentimes get sores. And she finds that a lot of regular shampoos can really irritate that. I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why those shampoos are going to irritate it is most likely there are chemical ingredients and different surfactants and sodium lauryl sulfate and EDTA and chemical fragrance that are then getting into your pores, or in that case, getting into that cut, and can be making things a lot worse. So I really love a company, Hello Good Juju. They're good friends of the show here and of mine, Lisa and Alexis. And they have shampoo and conditioning bars. And one of them that they have is actually a treatment bar, and it's their scalp care bar. And what's great is that it helps any of the itching and the irritation in the scalp. It also helps to naturally remove any of the old product buildup, dandruff, itching, anything that's been accumulating on the surface of the scalp. And they use all natural and certified organic ingredients. They use different plant extracts. And so they have things like coconut oil in there and charcoal, which charcoal is amazing for helping to break up any of the dandruff or any of the other buildup. And it's really antimicrobial. And then they actually use aloe leaf juice, which is an enzyme that helps to repair those dead skin cells on the scalp. There's sweet almond oil, which is super rich in vitamin E and other antioxidants. And then there's lavender and geranium that they add in for their scents. And I think in that one too, they have like a citrus and a fruity or a floral one, but I love the lavender and geranium. And lavender is very tonal. It's very healing. So for this woman who wrote in and said she's got, scalp irritation and scabs and she's scratching and itching, I would definitely go with that one. And there is a conditioning bar that actually accompanies that. Here's the thing that is the coolest, not just about how good these products are, but one bar of the shampoo and one bar of the conditioner. So each one, that one bar of shampoo, that saves you 3 bottles of shampoo. And the one conditioning bar saves you 3 bottles of conditioner. That is 6 less bottles in your life and on this planet, right? That we are not putting into a landfill somewhere. And these bars typically last anywhere from 70 to 80 washes. That's pretty epic. Now, you can save using the code GenPike10. You can also save St. Francis using code GenPike15. And then the final shout out that I'll give is for inflammation of the skin. So one of the ladies in our hormone project, Anne, her and I were chatting, and she works in a store where she has to wear a mask and she has to wear a visor. And she was starting to get a lot of irritation and a dermatitis around her mouth from this. Because think about it, your mouth, your oral cavity is a breeding ground for bacteria. And if you are wearing a mask where that is being trapped all the time, breathing in and out, it's making its way into your skin, and you're probably going to get more breakouts or have these rashes in different situations. So Anne started to use the Soothe oil from Skin Essence. She actually called them. I don't know if you know this, but you can call up Skin Essence. If you go to their website, skinessence.ca, you can hop on the phone, talk to one of their skincare consultants, and they'll help you determine which product is the best for you. So the Soothe one is really nice. It's great for sensitive skin. It's awesome for rashes, any type of redness. It's a really good one. I have with some of my clients who have this kind of mask dermatitis that has started, we'll use Soothe and sometimes even a little bit of e-cream over top to really enhance their hydration for that. So I thought I would share that with you. You can enter in the code GenPike20 to save 20% off of your first order. And then you can continue forever and ever to use the code GenPike15 and save 15% off of your further orders moving forward. All right. So my new friend, Dr. Ben Reeves, he is an award-winning naturopathic physician. He's the founder of the Portland Clinic of Natural Health. He's an integrative, this is an integrative medicine clinic that specializes in helping resolve chronic disease with natural medicine. He is the author of the highly acclaimed book, The Serpent and the Butterfly, The 7 Laws of Healing. We actually go deep into his book. the name of this book, the whole meaning behind it. We talk about the 7 different laws of healing as well in today's interview. And Ben is a recognized leading expert in the mind, body, healing, and alternative medicine industry. He was awarded one of Portland's top medical providers in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And he has appeared in many different shows and publications. He is a member of the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians and the Oregon Association of Naturopathic Physicians. He lives in Portland with his wife and their dog, and he may actually be a brand new dad as we speak right now, because he and his wife were expecting their baby pretty darn soon after we actually recorded the session. So we also might be congratulating Dr. Ben Reeves on becoming a daddy for the very first time. And I had a really great chat with Ben, both on air before we hit record and during this episode. So I hope that you all enjoy this one today, that you have an amazing day, and that we'll see you back here next week. Take care, everyone. Hi, ladies. Welcome back to another weekly episode of the Simplicity Sessions podcast. I'm so excited to be bringing you our episode and our interview this week. If you've been following me here for a while, you know that we oscillate on Mondays. I interview really fantastic guests to bring you not only groundbreaking information, but to get us to continue to become these critical thinkers that we've been encouraging you to all along, and to go deeper than the surface. And on Thursdays, we do our Simplicity Bites, where we just get right in there for a short period of time. Today is one of our longer, more in-depth interviews, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation. I think the timing of this could not be better. And I'll say that for those of you listening, but also personally for myself. I know I've definitely been feeling and trying to digest and absorb the world around us as it's been coming to us. So can you please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben Reeves, who is a practicing naturopathic physician in Portland, Oregon, on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's we were just chatting before we hit record about, kind of some of the energy and some of the new things that have been happening in the world in the last year and a bit. And I think that, we're going to talk today about a lot of your own learning and philosophies, and a lot of the concepts in your book, The Serpent and the Butterfly, the 7 laws of healing. And I said to you, I think that the timing of this is so relevant for us to be able to connect with our own bodies, not only ability and capacity to heal, but to also fully recognize just the toll of everything that, we come in contact with in our system. I think sometimes we get very wrapped up in just the physical of like what we eat and what we supplement with, without taking into consideration everything else.
So true.
So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of, some background of how this, I know as a, naturopathic physician, obviously you've had an interest in health for a long time, but what was it about this specific topic of healing and writing this book that you were just like, this is it. This is what I have to actually create right now?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. For me, it was really about writing the book that I wish existed back when I was 20, about 20 years ago. A book like Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements, or The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Or some
oh my
of
God,
these
that's
books
my favorite book. That is my absolute, I read it every year. I reread that book since I was 19 years old. That is my favorite book.
Wow. Oh, it's one of my favorites as well. I've probably read it 5 or 6 times. It's just incredible. Yeah, and I really wanted to write a book that inspired me that way about the laws of healing in the body, about natural medicine. And I wanted to make it a short read that you could read in an hour and a half, a light read, inspiring. And then I came across the material over the last 10 years, and it's been a long work in progress. But that's really what it's about. It was kind of selfish. It was about creating the book that I wish existed, because it would have changed my life. If I would have read this book when I was 20, I probably wouldn't have had to go spend $400,000 at med school to become a naturopathic doctor, because I would have understood a lot of things from an evidential basis, as well as from a traditional basis.
Yeah. And is that something that in clinical practice, when you're working with your patients, did you feel yourself having that internal dialogue? Like, oh my gosh, if this existed and I could just give it to them to help them, to go that much deeper in their healing. Was that happening time and time again? Like, was that the final thing that actually had you be like, that's it, I'm creating the space, I'm writing this, I'm putting it down?
It actually existed long before I even began seeing patients as a doctor. And this is something I'm relatively new to, being a doctor. I've only been a doctor for about 5 years. And then I had a diverse background, in business, in the healing arts. And I'm an avid reader and passionate about functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, alternative medicine. And I even was like a head cook at a retreat center back in Big Sur, California, as in my 20s. Wow. Cooking for 300 people a night, and lots of really well-known healers like Deepak Chopra, Andrew Weil, you name it. And I'd spend time with these people, read their books, and I really wished that there was a book. So I read all the material, and there really wasn't a book that captured it. I mean, probably Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success would be one of the ones that is up there for me as kind of distilling the essence of yoga, the essence of medicine in a way that I could understand. And it's a different book, but this book was kind of inspired by that.
Yeah. I think it's amazing because as someone I've been in clinical practice for over 20 years now, and I know that when I have the initial conversation with women, my practice is all women and inadvertently their children and families. But it typically comes from a place of what they feel like they've done or are doing wrong in terms of the food and the supplements. And as you go deeper into this book and you talk about these 7 various laws of healing, this book is not based on that, right? This is, and that's where I think we get stuck, is in the single prong, one lane approach versus everything that is contributing to the distress of our body. Can you go a little bit deeper with us? I really do want to create this visual for our listeners about what these 7 laws are. So maybe if we can talk about what they are, and then we can start to go a little deeper into each.
Sure. So the first law is what I call the law of vitality. It's obviously the vital force. There's this chi, this prana. You can call it whatever you want. We could call it mitochondrial, energy as well. But this energy is working to always heal us, to restore normal structure and function in the body. And we can work with it or we can work against it. And so that really, so I call it the law of vitality. And, it's obviously there's nothing that I invented in this book whatsoever. Literally, I'm just, but it really starts with acknowledging this vital force. And then the second law, I think, is probably the second most important in terms of it's the law. I call it the law of disease. Mm-hmm. And the founder of naturopathic medicine, his name was Dr. Henri Lindlar. He was Germano-American. He came over to America in the early 1900s, and he was a medical doctor. And he basically, in his book, which is called Nature Cure, it's the most famous naturopathic book ever written. He says that disease is caused by 3 things, and basically, I put them into modern language: deficiency, toxicity, and weak vitality. And so if we understand this, it's so powerful because we can work to lower toxicity, to raise deficiency, and then also to enhance our vitality. And so it's really a way of thinking as opposed to doing the right thing, taking the right supplement. And mm-hmm. Everyone's a little different. So I think that's a great place to start, is with those 2 laws. And after probably about 6 or 7 years of reading all the material, I found that there were only 7 laws. I couldn't distill it down any further to less than 7. And so this book is the 7 laws. I couldn't get it down any further.
All right. So do we want to park it right here and go deeper into these, the first 2 laws, and then we can start to extrapolate from that and go forward?
That sounds great.
Okay. So something that you already hit on here, this concept of disease, is that it's even taking disease and massaging that word out and looking at it. And like you're saying, the 3 different pillars of it: toxicity, deficiencies, and weakness, which all then obviously connect to our lack of or our presence of vitality in our body. Yeah. So how do you, when you are teaching people about this, where do you begin with these 2?
Yeah. So when a person's in front of me, and I've got a very active, very busy clinical practice. When a person's in front of me, I'm looking at their symptoms, and I'm looking at their whole story, right? I mean, you're a holistic nutritionist, and you've got a really strong background in all of this. So I'm really preaching to the choir, but I'm looking at their symptoms, and their symptoms are really a reflection of imbalances. It's the way their body's pivoting, almost like a fighter.
Right.
And so I don't see their symptoms as something that's wrong. It's more like this is the way their body compensated for an imbalance. And then I'm looking, what type of imbalances are we talking about? And I'm looking for these three things. I'm saying, where is the person toxic? Where is the person deficient? And how is their vitality? And so, everyone's a little different. Sometimes it's one or the other, or it's a combination of all three. But that's really where I dig in. And so, of course, doing the case history, taking a case history and looking at their, doing a physical exam, and then probably running some labs, some routine blood work, because I'm a primary care physician. So I'm doing a lot of routine blood work, and then some specialty functional labs. But I learn a lot in that first visit. And so this is kind of, this is my way in, and it sounds so simple, but it's really, it's amazing how common sense is not so common.
Right. And I think, in what you were saying there too, is that you have the conversation first. I think this is the place that people need to understand. I actually just did another interview as a guest on a live show, and they were asking me, just tell us like the top 1, 2, 3 things to balance your hormones. And I was like, that's like a loaded question, because it's different for everyone. And unless you've had an in-depth conversation, you've gotten their health history, you've created this timeline, you understand more about them, even choosing the tests that you're talking about, there's tons of tests. You want to be really specific, in what it is that you are looking at. So once you do this initial conversation, you run some of the tests, how do I word this? So I know a lot of clinicians can take a clinical approach where it's like, no, we just look at the results, and then based on what the results tell us, we just, we move forward with the protocol. I don't feel like that's your approach. I feel like you see the results, but you see the person, the human being that you're working with. And then there is like this synergy of them coming together.
Exactly. And I know it's a little bit trite, that I treat people, not disease, or I treat people with disease or people with imbalance. I don't treat labs. I don't treat, I don't treat lab values because that type of medicine really doesn't work. I mean, so they've got low iron here. Take some ferritin with some vitamin C, or take some iron with some vitamin C. Yeah. Sometimes that's very powerful, but it's like, well, what's driving the iron deficiency here? Exactly. Is there leaky gut? Is there an emotional trauma? Is there a hypothyroidism? Just looking for those root causes, and then sometimes it's even deeper than that. Exactly.
Yeah, and I find that sometimes people can get frustrated with that approach because they're like, no, just tell me the thing to buy or give me the prescription, because I think it's how we've been taught, it's how we've been trained. There's a pill for your ill. So just tell me the ill, give me the pill, and let me move on. But then that person never actually feels better. They don't achieve the vitality. In fact, they hang out. They get a mortgage in land of the disease, right? And they start to build their assets there.
Yep.
And get used to feeling unwell. So when you are taking somebody through that journey, obviously the end game can be very, very different. But you run labs, you look at that, you're talking to the individual. What next?
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about the lowest common denominators and keeping it really simple. And so, there's such a broad spectrum of people. Some people, believe in homeopathy. Other people, they're completely against it. And I do use homeopathy in my practice, but it's not the focal point of my practice. Right. It's not for everyone. And so sometimes it's just putting together 3 or 4 supplements, making 1 or 2 suggestions, maybe giving them a tincture, maybe doing an adjustment, since I do physical adjustments as well. Yeah. But sometimes it's just that, and this is where it gets into medicine being an art that, employs the sciences. It really is kind of an art. And it's going to be a little different for everyone, but I keep it very simple. Sometimes it is just a little bit of vitamin D, a little bit of magnesium, and then maybe changing their thyroid medication to one that actually works.
Right.
Sometimes it's as powerful as that. Other times it's as powerful as just listening. to their story. And then other times it's, well, we got to do some really complex, toxic screening, and we find, oh, wow, there's toxic mold here.
Right.
What's behind that? Oh, Lyme disease. And so it really it's going to be a little different for everyone. And I'm a general practitioner, so I love having lots of different cases.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that, like this as an artist, like having a blank canvas, and then you have your palette, but you might use oils, pastel. You have all these different, as you as a practitioner, modalities. And that's what's so nice is that, as someone who not only practices, but I also I'm a patient. I have a multitude. I have a Chinese medicine doctor, an ND. I work with a homeopath. Like I have an osteo, a chiro, all these people. That's my village of health. And what's so great is that, like, I'm always changing and evolving, and so are my needs. So depending on what the individual needs, you're really able to customize their health.
Well, and see, and this is the thing, Jen. I think this is probably the most important thing about this book or about this work is that the laws of healing in this book that are articulated, that obviously I did not create. Right. We have thousands of men and women from all different traditions sharing this wisdom, and I'm just articulating it like here it is, But I'm giving credit because I'm going to live and I'm going to die, and there's nothing here that I did. But the powerful thing is that it's not having the right modality or having the right supplement. It's having the right way of thinking. And I find that so liberating, because if a person thinks of disease in these ways that are coming from all these different traditions, then it's not about, it's about finding the right thing for oneself. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because I think it's so easy to get caught up in, well, doc, just tell me the right probiotic. Tell me what's the right trace mineral. Can you tell me the right form of vitamin D, the right form of iron? Mm-hmm. It's sure, those things are important, but sometimes it's not even about taking that. It's about optimizing the digestion so you can get that from your food. Well, then how do you do that? Well, let's test your blood and see what foods you can't digest, or let's run your epigenetics and let's see how you methylate. And it's just there's so many ways, but it's all about the right thinking. It's not about the right test.
And I love that you bring this up. And this is the hardest part, is that because we are dealing with, in the general public, for those people, it's no different. I always say to people, this is my jam. This is my lane. Everything you're saying to me completely connects. I love it. But if I were to go into, like, my husband is a contractor and a custom builder, I don't understand why the man needs to have 6 different saws and 24 different screwdrivers. I'm just like, don't you just need a saw and a screwdriver? And he looks at me like, every job requires something slightly different, Jen. And that's how the human body is. Every single symptom and message that we get from our body, it's essentially asking for something, a little bit different, all leading back to the same objective, which is to have pillar 1, which is vitality. But we believe that the solution lives outside of us. And everything you're talking about is simply nudging the body, the nervous system, everything back into the direction of, like, you can actually be the healer of you. You're just going to need to learn a few new things along the way.
It's so true, and it really gets into that. It's all about good listening, and like, I've got a background in cooking, and I think it's a lot like cooking. When I've got a wonderful piece of a wonderful eggplant or a wonderful piece of wild caught salmon. It's about me getting out of the way. It's about me maybe just using a little sea salt, a little bit of olive oil, the right heat, and maybe a little bit of herbs, but just getting out of the way and letting the food speak. And I hate to compare a patient-doctor relationship to cooking, a piece of salmon, but the thing is we can trust the healing power of nature. We can trust the innate healing capacity within us. And that's really what this is all about, helping the body get what it needs so that it can heal itself, reducing the toxicity so the body can heal itself, getting the vitality up so the body can heal itself. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about how instead of looking outside, we can maybe redirect a little bit inside and begin to trust that our body is always working to heal itself. And that if we can just get out of the way and maybe remove those obstacles to cure with the help of, a functional nutritionist or a chiropractor or a naturopathic physician, or a shaman or the right functional medicine doctor, then we can actually heal, and our body can do it pretty rapidly if everything's set up right.
Yeah, I know for a lot of people, it can feel so overwhelming when there's so many options. But at the same time, it's so liberating because then you don't live in this belief that there is only one way to work with your body. Because if you go down the one way path and then it doesn't work, then do you believe that you're just destined to be unwell for the rest of your life? And I always say to people, like, as a mom, something happens when you're carrying a baby and you give birth where you don't take no for an answer. And so if something is going on with your child and like mother's intuition kicks in, like there's nothing that you could do to convince me if my child was unwell and someone kept saying they're fine or this is the only thing, like I wouldn't stop. I would be that warrior that you need to be as a parent and keep digging. And I wish more people would do that for their own health and body. Is if you feel like something is off and out of balance, your body never lies to you. Your brain will. Your brain will, because it'll try and protect you. It'll try to keep you safe and it'll try to make logic out of it. But your body will never lie to you.
It's so true. And that's really, I think, the power of, functional and naturopathic medicine, where we come in is we pick up on the things that are missed by, conventional medicine. It's like if I run some routine blood work, it's like, oh, you're normal. Everything's fine. Yeah. And the person says, no, I don't feel right. There's definitely something wrong. And
Can I ask you something?
Please.
For those that are listening? It's interesting because there is, and I'm sure this was done purposefully, there is quite the contradictory use of words in the title. You've got the serpent and the butterfly. So you have something like a snake, which would typically be looked at as something like evil and, venomous, and people would turn away from, and then something beautiful like a butterfly, which really symbolizes this transformation. So why did you choose those for the title?
Yeah. So, the snake obviously is in the caduceus, the staff that is the symbol of medicine across the entire planet. And the original one has two serpents, that are entwining up a pole. And they're going up a staff, right? And then at the very top, they're uniting or they're looking at each other. And so I'm kind of taking the serpent from that symbol. And then in most mythology, the serpent is the symbol of death and renewal. And the serpent sheds its skin to be reborn anew, just like the moon sheds its shadow. Yeah. And so the serpent really is not only is it a symbol of evil, as you say, in some traditions, but it's also a symbol of the knowledge of life and death and of medicine and of transformation and of healing. And so that's the symbol there. And then the butterfly also is this symbol of transformation, where it goes through the three stages of transmogrification, as they say, going from the lymph to the larva, the nymph larva, and then to the butterfly stage. And so I actually created a myth that kind of came to me, where a serpent swallows a butterfly and then wakes up one day to become a dragon. Because if you really combine the two symbols, it's a dragon when you combine the two, earth, air, fire, and water. And there actually are some myths of this, of a serpent eating a dragon, or I'm sorry, eating a butterfly and then becoming a dragon, flying in the sky and then swallowing its own tail as well to become the Ouroboros, which is the completion of the final cycle. So I'm kind of just playing with myth here because I love mythology, and that's it's really all about that. And then the forces, the laws of healing are all kind of contained within those images.
I love that analogy, and I love that you talk about the shedding of the moon, right? Of the new moon and the blue. I teach a lot about cycle syncing and awareness for women who are still actually cycling, but also for women who are not, and just our connection not only to the moon and the lunar cycle, but the seasons and nature as a whole. Like we love to think that we live in our own box, and that we're in these, various compartments, and we are not. Like, we're so interwoven and interconnected. And, that plays a big, big role. So you started to talk about the three aspects of the butterfly. So let's go on to the third actual healing law.
Yeah. So the third law of healing, so we've got the law of vitality, the law of disease, and Actually, I'm a little bit embarrassed because I need to just grab it because I'm thinking of the
Yeah,
fourth
it's
law
okay.
here.
You're ready to
I got
jump
carried
ahead
away
to it.
in the image of the myth of the butterfly. Yes, we have the law of cure. And this actually comes from a well-known medical doctor named Constantine Herring, who was a medical physician as well as a famous homeopathic physician. And he found that healing proceeds in the body in four ways. From the top down, from the inside out, from the most important to the least important organ, and then in the reverse order of the symptoms in which they occur. And so it's just a very powerful a law, and I've certainly observed this in my practice. And so that, that's really, if we're to observe healing and cure, we look for these clues that are kind of showing that the body is healing, that things are healing from the top down, from the inside out, from the most important to the least important, and then in the reverse order. And it's not always a hard and fast, black and white kind of thing, but we often see these clues. Like, for example, oftentimes inner organs like the liver or the lungs will resolve and clear before the skin. And so that would be an example of things moving from the inside out. Or as a person's healing from, say, a lung infection or a pneumonia, maybe they'll end up with a rash or something. And I, as a naturopathic doctor, it sounds, depending on the person, I may be able to see that, things are kind of beginning to clear. Of course, don't go try this at home.
Right.
You need to do it within a doctor, right?
But this is one of the beautiful things about homeopathy. Like, we have homeopathy is our apothecary, along with other, botanicals. Like, we have many different tools, but homeopathy for us and with our kids has been what we've always turned to when the body is unwell first, because what you were describing there is it's taking into account the physical, but the mental, emotional, the systems. And the key with homeopathy is that when you see something shift, the key word is shift. It doesn't mean everything gets better right away, but maybe like the mucus that was clogged is now like coming out, which some people might be like, oh God, I don't want it coming out. Take something to suppress it and shove it back in. Or you use the example of the rash in the skin. Like, our body has holes for a reason, right? Like, it's not all meant to be taking in. We need to also be able to properly filter and to, release and push out. So, I love pulling that part of homeopathy into it, in that sometimes it can look like our bodies are getting worse when they're actually healing.
Exactly. And that's where we serve as guides to kind of just say, hey, you know what? I'm actually expecting this, or this might be a good thing. Let's honor this journey and let's see where it goes. And so, for example, I had a patient who she had a terrible burn about probably 10 years ago, and it was she burnt her torso in a fire, and it went really deep, left a pretty gnarly scar. And anyway, when she was seeing me a couple of years ago, she was doing a bunch of infrared saunas several times weekly. It wasn't something that I had prescribed, but it was something that she was doing as part of our treatment plan. It was amazing. After a period of time, her burn actually came back from 10 years previously. And it came back in full force, painful, exactly in the spot where it had happened before. And then after a period of several days, it actually cleared, and then the skin cleared, and then her scar actually went away, which I know sounds miraculous, but it was just incredible. And
you can tell my face as you're telling me, like, I'm not fazed by this, because I innately believe in the body's ability. I 100% believe in the body's ability. And I believe in something you said a few times in the beginning, which is we need to get out of our own way. And we need to come back to this core belief that our body is brilliant and wise. And the toxicity that you're talking about, I think a huge part of that, yes, it's environmental, it's the food, it's all of that, but it's our toxic way of believing that it lives outside of us. And we need to come back to that core place of, like, do you trust? We are living in a very critical time right now where we've always done this on some level, but since 2020 have now given authority outside of our body for how we are going to stay healthy, stay strong, protect our immune system, make different decisions. And it's a very slippery slope.
I couldn't agree more with you, everything you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because you were so excited about number 4. What is number 4?
So number 4 is the law of compensation. And in a way, this one's kind of the most boring, perhaps, but it's so easily forgotten. And it's this. So this actually comes again from the founder of naturopathic medicine in his book Nature Cure, which he wrote in 1913. He said that everything you do to the body has first a primary action that is easily observed, and it's short-lived. It's transient. It lasts a short time, and then there's always a secondary reaction that goes in exactly the opposite direction of the first. It's actually much more long-lasting and more potent. And so this is a law that no one talks about, and it's not even talked about in pharmacology. But literally, this is why most drugs don't work, or they'll work for a little while, and then they'll do exactly the opposite of what they were intended to do. So we need to raise the dose, or we need to change the drug. And this is all. I think a great example would be hot and cold with physiology. So if you have a high ankle sprain, you're playing some basketball, and you need to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. The old protocol would be RICE, RICE, right? Rest, ice, compression, elevation. So you put maybe an ice pack on your ankle, you elevate it. Well, if you leave that ice pack on your ankle for too long, the recommended is 20 minutes. Let's say you leave it on for 30 or 40 minutes because you're watching Netflix or something. It's going to actually do the exact opposite of first of all, it's going to vasoconstrict all of the vasculature. It's going to take the pain down because it's going to drive blood into the tissues. Pain's going to go down. You're going to feel like your ankle sprain is not as painful. But if you leave it on too long, the body will actually respond, and it will vasodilate, and it will get red again, and it will actually become even more painful than before. And it's actually the law of compensation in full effect. And so the same thing happens with every supplement, with every drug, everything we do. So we have to take this into account. That what we're going to do, what we take is going to potentially have the opposite effect of what we're doing, and so we can actually use this law to heal ourselves, and this is where homeopathy comes in as well, because homeopathy is diluted down to such a degree to where it doesn't really have a primary effect, but then it'll have a very powerful secondary effect.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. And also just in regards to how compensation shows up in our body in general. Like I know a lot of people, you gave the example of like the ankle sprain, they can relate to it maybe physically where you sprain the ankle on the right and then, next thing you know, your left knee is hurting you or your opposite hip, or just like the way that the patterns of our bodies work, right? That's like a literal sense of compensation, in that. What about let me ask you this. I'm sure you have worked with somebody who, they are skeptical, right? So it's like, I hear what you're saying. I don't actually believe it yet. How do you work with an individual who's like, I'm hearing it, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't necessarily believe in it quite yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with those types of patients, I'm just doing the basics and looking for checking their blood and looking for some deficiencies, and then using just pure evidence-based medicine, which I pretty much everything I do is evidence-based, even if it's homeopathy, because there's a lot there. But it doesn't. I don't have to talk them into anything, because like, well, look here, your ferritin is really quite low. This could be a reason you're feeling so much fatigue. Mm-hmm. So let's take the right dose. Let's take 60 milligrams of elemental iron and a little bit of vitamin C, and let's see how you're doing. And then let's get the inflammation down in your gut so that you can actually absorb this iron. Mm-hmm. And so I'll have to work with that person a little differently, but we'll usually get to where we want to. Or I'll say, here's a homeopathic pellet. I just want you to take this. Here, I'll tell them what it is. I'll say it may not do anything. If it's the right homeopathic medicine, it'll help you with your vitality, your energy. If it's not the right one, it's not going to really do much of anything. And then we'll just move on to the next thing.
Yeah. So what is the fifth?
Yeah. So the fifth one is the law of resonance. And this gets into the doctrine of signatures and the fact that we can use like to cure like, or like to treat like, and that everything we do has a resonance with For example, certain plants have certain resonances with organs in our body. Like milk thistle has a lot of resonance with the liver and the kidneys. And I mean, this is much more spoken about in Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine than it is in naturopathic medicine. But using the law of resonance, there's certain therapies, certain modalities that are going to resonate with the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I look at it a lot in the terms of music or in the terms of the actual law of resonance, where I'm a musician. So and my wife plays violin, I play guitar. So if I have my guitar next to her violin and if I pluck one of the strings of my guitar, her violin will begin to vibrate at exactly the same harmonics that are shared in common with my guitar and with nothing else. So her violin will begin to vibrate. That's the law of resonance. And so if we can use this law in medicine, it's so incredible, right? I give the right herb or medicine and perhaps it'll resonate with the person.
I love that. I love that. And for some of you listening, if that maybe doesn't land with you in that way, think of this like, well, just energetic resonance, right? So it's like you could be the person that goes into a room and you're like in the best mood and somebody in that room is not. And that person's energy can literally start to suck the life out of you. And people are like, oh yeah, like I know that person, they have a name, right? And then the opposite can happen where you could be the person in that mood and then you spend time with someone who's like uplifting and nothing major had to happen other than you being in their presence in order to feel that vibration. So it's, I think that example that you gave I think it's really powerful for it. So we've got vitality, disease, cure, compensation, resonance. Where do we move from there?
Yeah, so it ends pretty quickly. The next law is the law of synergy. And this one, basically we can combine different therapies, different modalities, and they have a much greater effect than if they were just used individually. And then same with certain plants. Certain plants, when used together, are much more powerful than by themselves. And so this one's incredibly powerful. It also gets into treating the whole instead of just treating parts. Because if we treat the whole, we're actually synergistically, we're going to get a much more greater impact. So if I'm treating several aspects of a case, the person's much more likely to move in the direction of healing than if I just focus in on the thyroid or just focus in on the skin.
I'm going to pull back to this because you've used this example a couple of times where you talk about iron, right? So again, I work with women. Women notoriously have low iron could be many different reasons. But a lot, like you're talking about the fact like, okay, yes, let's give you some supplemental iron, some vitamin C to help with absorption. But absorption is happening in the small intestine and in the gut. So if we don't address those areas, we could try all different types of iron and guess what's going to happen? Nothing. You might actually just get constipated and be out money, but nothing's going to change. So it's understanding like, yes, we can help you here, but we also need to improve over here because the gut and the small intestine, this is actually the root. If we don't get them on our team, it's an uphill battle the whole way through.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it'd be very interesting to see a study, on how much iron is absorbed when the gut is optimized. Because I would be willing to bet that once we've done the food sensitivity, the food intolerance testing, and we've upregulated gut function, that probably more iron is absorbed that way than if I actually give the iron supplement. And so that's where I start. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, because our bodies, we weren't born into this world evolutionary with the body being like, we only have these things. Now we're going to need you to go and get this out of a bottle. It's like, go and find it. You need to like hunter gatherer it, right? Like, did it swim in the ocean, crawl across the land, fall from a tree, or grow to the ground? Go eat those things. That's where you're going to find, what your body requires. And I think that that's the other side of the coin is that we are putting a lot of convenience food into our bodies because we are busy and we are tired and, our calendars are jammed. And unfortunately, a lot of that convenience is leading to a very inconvenient decrease in our health because it's devoid of so many of these things you're talking about.
Precisely. And then also the fact that our food supply no longer contains the minerals that it once did either. So we could eat at the farmer's market every day, shop at Whole Foods or the health food store every day, cook from scratch every day from home, and we may not even be getting what we need that way. It's amazing.
I know. And it's looking at like, we really have two soil beds we're talking about, right? Like we've got the fertility and soil bed of our own body and our microbiome and bacterial makeup, and then we have the food that it's been grown in, and the two have to really work together. And this is, I know for, those of you that are listening, you might just be like, what? Like where? Because it's overwhelming. The irony of having a brand with the word simplicity in it for health is that there can be simplicity and ease in this. The struggle is that as a society, we have not been taught the core fundamentals of health. So then you live life, you get into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it is, you have a story and a limiting belief of how health is actually achieved. And you have to go back now and you have to cut the cords and you have to rewrite this story while you're learning. It's a lot.
It's so true. And I think that's why these laws are so simple and so powerful and applicable. It's very practical. The law of disease, the fact that, deficiency, toxicity, and weak vitality, we can call it, like I said, we can call it mitochondrial insufficiency if you want to go down the functional medicine road. But if we can address those three things, if we can get more energy, if we can get more nutrition, and if we can reduce all the inflammatory cytokines in our blood, get the toxicity down, get our exposures down, it's amazing how much better we feel almost right away.
Okay. So mitochondria, you've said it 3 times. This is biology 101. We're going back to grade 9 right now. For those who do not know what mitochondria is and why our mitochondrial function is so important for our health, can we go there for a moment?
Absolutely. I mean, the mitochondria are basically the energy houses of the cells. They run something called the electron transport chain, which requires nutrients like CoQ10 and some B vitamins and some other things. And if those little guys aren't firing on all cylinders, there's no energy, there's no chi, there's no ATP to help the body do things. And so, in other words, everything we're doing is driving these cells, is helping these cells work better.
So everything we do for our health, the food the end game goal is we need to get these suckers, the nutrients into the actual cell so that we can be supplying our energy chain from there. And then we live it out from that source. Now, the other word that you said in there, which is a very powerful one right now, is cytokines. And so we are living in the land of everybody being so afraid to, touch, breathe, look like anything because of the viral load that is out in the world. When those of us in the functional, medicine and holistic health space have a very different way of looking at what's happening and a different level of understanding, and have chosen to not come from a place of fear-mongering people, but rather teaching them. So let's spend a little bit of time when we're talking about cytokine. What are cytokines and why are we hearing about things like cytokine storms and how this impacts our bodies and our health?
Yeah, so cytokines, in their very essence, these are signaling cells. And they're little proteins, and they're usually part of a cascade. In other words, one leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And the place that I spend the most time when talking about cytokines is the gut. Hippocrates, the founding father of modern medicine, 2,500 years ago, said all disease begins in the gut. And so I'm looking at the gut, and I'm assessing a person, and I'm thinking, to what degree are they producing a lot of inflammatory cytokines? Not all cytokines are inflammatory, but generally they're going to be part of the inflammation cascade in the body. And we learn about this in basic immunology, and it's just a fact. And so that's why I start with the gut. And I know that if I can help a person optimize their gut, get it healed a little bit, get it upregulated, get them absorbing more nutrients, get that inflammation down, then I know that the cytokines are going to come down, which means toxicity is going to come down, because when there are lots of cytokines firing in a person's body, that's a little more toxicity in the blood. I know a lot of people don't think about it that way, but I do, and I think that it's important. And so that's kind of my spiel. What about you, Jen? I'm curious. Like, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, and I see it all the time in practice, because a lot of the functional tests that we're running are looking at inflammatory biomarkers. We're also having deep conversations with women and asking about other comorbidities and other non-health factors. And so you start to see this, this stream of what she's been going through in her life, and you look upstream and you look at everything that she's come in contact with. And then it's like, what is the final poke of the bear or the final straw that breaks the camel's back? And it is like, things have been brewing for a long time. The triggers have all been there. And then it's like, what is going to be the biggest impact or biggest trigger or multitude of them hitting the body at one time? But then the system is just like, you know what? Boom. Here you go. And that's where we have dramatic symptoms show up, where we have, the person, you could have two people that come in contact with the same thing, same genetic makeup, same family, same parents bore from, and they have completely different responses. And it's because it comes down to that bio-individuality. It comes down to the microbiome in the gut, comes down to, anything, the gut, the skin, wherever it may be, and how that individual resonance is going to actually come forward. And the other thing I would say, I know you know this as well too, and you believe this, is that what's the individual stress? What is going on a psycho-spiritual, mental, emotional state as well too? The environment they live in, mold talk, there's so many different things. And that's where my frustration lies. And I know so many of us is that we are narrowing the finger down to pointing at one issue, when the reason that people's bodies are more vulnerable to certain things is actually the day-to-day life they're living, not what we're being fed. Not like, and I don't mean literally nutrition, I mean like the information we're being fed.
It's so true. And I think the easiest low-hanging fruit really is what we put into our bodies, in my opinion, in terms of what we could control to get the most bang for our buck. And I think that's where this law of disease really comes in and is powerful, because if I'm eating certain foods that my body can't digest, then it's going to drive toxicity and deficiency, and it's going to make me not have energy. And basically, the one way to think about it is that if I can't break something down, it's going to ferment and maldigest for a day or two in my gut. It's going to drive a cascade of inflammatory cytokines. It's going to raise the toxicity. And then downstream, there are going to be all of these, we call them sequelae, basically the symptoms that come from some kind of trigger. And so we're going to see the cytokines rise, the toxicity rise, the inflammation downstream, and that's going to manifest genetically and epigenetically, depending on how we're wired and how we're predisposed. And then it's going to be a double whammy, because while that little bit of food is maldigesting and fermenting in my gut, what's it going to do? It's going to block my gut from absorbing the nutrients I need from my meal. And then I'm not going to have what I need to get things done, to get those mitochondria firing. Then I'm going to be low in the vitality range. So it's all connected. Cycle. Bam, cycle. Yep.
And all this undigested food is feeding the bacteria that we don't want, like the opportunistic, the dysbiotic bacteria that now is like, oftentimes it's the bacteria and the other critters living in our body. I mean, 90% of us is made up of that. They have a certain expression. And now it's like, so all these things, and our immune system is sitting there behind the scenes and it's like, look, I'm good, but I'm not that frigging good. And now I'm overwhelmed and I'm pissed. And now the immune system starts firing inappropriate responses. And now you've got a healthy body that was once healthy that is now starting to attack its own healthy tissue, that's taking the heme out of, our cells, that is robbing, we could just blow this up into a whole nother conversation, but I just, more of these talks need to happen, because you cannot possibly be educated on what's going on and how to take care of yourself by watching the 6 o'clock news.
Well, and this kind of gets into the vaccine topic, which I sort of stay away from personally, but I have a lot of patients. I have hundreds of patients, and a lot of times they say, Dr. Ben, what should I do? Should I get vaccinated? Should I not? And I say, that's up to you. And I say that if you're going to go get vaccinated, if you're going to go get the COVID vaccine, for example, I say, make sure you take a little selenium, a little vitamin C, a little bit of zinc, maybe a little bit of vitamin D. Take a little bit of that before the dose and after the dose, because we need to make sure your immune system is functioning, that it's actually awake, because studies show that a person's much more likely or much less likely to have an adverse reaction to a vaccine if they do that. Now, of course, this isn't obviously me consulting anyone. You have to talk to your doctor. And then the other question that people say is, Dr. Ben, should I vaccinate my kids? And I say, well, if you're not going to vaccinate your kids, then you better be committed to having the healthiest children you possibly can have. But if those kids are going to eat at McDonald's every day and they're going to eat the standard American diet, and then you probably want to get vaccinated, because those kids aren't going to have an immune system and they're going to get sick with everything that comes down the pike.
Right. Well, and I think in that it is definitely an individual response. Like I don't necessarily have the exact same views on everything you just said, only because, and that's it. But here's the thing is, we're two grown adults and can have differing opinions, but still come to the same place of, it comes down to the individual, right? It comes down to the individual. And, for us, like as a family, our kids are 13 and 15. We never vaccinated our children. And it wasn't that we made that choice and then we're like, now we have to be even more healthy. It was doing the research and understanding. And it was a lot of time and energy spent into that. And in the beginning, it was like, you know what, we're just not going to right now. And then a year down the road, and I'm not going to do it right now. And then we reevaluate, I read, I understand, I connect with other colleagues and people who are, on the front line of doing this. And we make that decision. But here's the thing is, we all deserve the right to make the decision, not have the decision made for us. And that's where I think, you and I do agree on that. And we're living in a time right now where that sovereignty and freedom of choice is starting to be taken away. And that's what's not okay. Because the other thing, like you said in there, is we don't actually know what a person's epigenetic expression or reaction is going to be once the injection is made, and you can't take it back out.
Nope.
Right? So it's
so true.
Yeah. So but thank you for starting to go there in that conversation. No, it's a loaded one. And it's one that
it is.
I can be very neutral about the conversation, again, because our choices are ours, and what somebody else chooses to do doesn't impact me. But I think it just comes down to knowledge, right? Having more conversations like this as well. And
I agree. Yeah.
So we got up to synergy. I know we're running out of time here. And by my count, that is 6. So what is the 7th?
Yeah. So the 7th is arguably the most important of them all. And it's the law of intention. It's the word intention, means to stretch into a purpose, or that's like the word it comes from etymologically. And, we really are the summation of what we think and feel and believe. And so what we intend, if we can visualize healing, that has an enormous impact on the outcome. And so it really starts with the intention to get well, the intention of being open to a new way of maybe getting well or improving or having symptoms resolve.
I love that. And intention is one of my favorite words. It's very powerful. I think sometimes we use it and say things like, well, my goal is this, or I want to achieve that. And it can be this really amazing flip of switch of languaging when you say like, well, my intention is, right? Like, this is what I'm moving towards. And I also do believe on what you were saying there. If we believe something intentionally is for our best interest, I think that offers a positive charge, whatever it is that you're choosing for yourself, right? If you believe something is not good for you, then I feel like you put that type of negative connotation and energy and charge to that intention in your system versus the other way around. So everything I'm taking from this conversation so far to me is like, be an observer, really start to just pay attention, slow down. You don't have to make radical decisions quickly. Like, you have time, listen to your body, listen to its feedback, and then start to apply these different healing laws, time over time as you go.
It's so true. And I think of so many sports champions, and they visualize winning before they win. And it's literally across the board, every single one of them, whether it's tennis or golf or football. And so why not with healing? And it's also on the part of the practitioner. When a patient's coming to see me, I'm visualizing them getting better before they even see me. As I'm reading their case, I'm setting that intention. And so when my intention meets theirs, and I can't help them very much if they don't believe they're going to get better, or if there's no intention to get better, there's very little I can do.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to the 5th law, which is resonance. If you're not on the same page, you can't want it more for someone else than they want it for themselves, right?
Exactly.
For that. So yeah, so good. Well, awesome conversation today. I've really enjoyed going back and forth with one another on this. What is the best way for people to stay in contact with you, to order your book, to learn more from you?
Yeah, just to go to my website, drreeves.com.
Okay. All right. Amazing. We will do that. We will link it all up. I have one final question for you before we head off into the rest of our days. How do you define simplicity for yourself?
That's a great question. How do I define simplicity? I think I'm gonna have to think about that one.
All right. I just got this image of you and your wife playing instruments, like music.
I think that for me, it's water. The secret is water. So I'm obsessed with float tanks and hydrotherapy. So if I'm in water at least once a day, then I have achieved simplicity, whether it's in a float tank or whether it's in my hot tub or whether it's in a spa or, in an Epsom salt bath or something.
That's amazing. Are you a water sign?
I am not. I am an earth sign.
Oh, what's your earth sign?
Virgo.
Oh, so am I.
Oh yeah? Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
But I asked, it's interesting. I'm earth, but we live on a lake. So like I'm looking
really?
right
Oh my
now
gosh. Wow. That's
we live on
amazing.
water.
That is so awesome.
We've talked a lot about moving and that, like we're building a tiny home right now. And I'm like, we have to be on water. I can't not live near water ever again because it's changed. Like, I think it rewired my nervous system.
Being next to the lake.
Yeah.
Wow.
Completely. Yeah. So I am with you as a fellow earth sign on the water. I feel it so much so. So anyways, I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again for coming on to the show. And ladies, for those of you listening, each and every week, my goal here is to invoke the ability to think and ask questions for yourself and to help you understand that there can most definitely be more simplicity and ease in all that you do. You just have to be willing to sit back and observe, to sometimes press pause, and to allow the innate power and ability of your body to step forward. We'll see you next week. Make it an awesome, awesome day. Take care, everyone. Wait, it's me. I'm back. I have a really important ask of you all. I know you're supercharged from listening to this episode and ready to jump out into the rest of your day. But before you do that, if you could do me the honor of leaving a review, of rating the podcast, of sharing with a friend, or posting on social media and hashtagging myself, Jen Pike, or the Simplicity Sessions podcast, it would help me a ton. You see, my personal goal beyond having these amazing conversations with guests or hosting these solo episodes is to increase the ability for this platform and these messages to be shared. So I'm asking you, the incredible community that I have here, if you would help me out with this goal that I have of mine. Whether you're coming to me through iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, I would love to know the medium you are listening to this episode and this show on. And if you can rate, review, and subscribe, it would mean a whole lot. Thank you all so much.